How's it going, everyone? I'm Jakejames Lugo, and welcome to my channel. So with so much happening right now in the world of Star Wars, let's talk about some Star Wars games, specifically the Star Wars Battlefront series. And no, I'm not talking about EA Star Wars Battlefront, everybody already knows about that. I'm talking about the good Battlefront games back on the PlayStation 2. A lot of people praise these games, so instead of just looking at one of them, let's look at both Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2 from Pandemic Studios. Were they actually better than what we have right now? Well, let's find out together. If you're a big fan of the Star Wars movies, chances are you've seen the tons of video games released over the years. There's so many out there and we'd be here all day going over each one, but one of the most interesting ones to come out was the Star Wars Battlefront series by Pandemic Studios. The first game was released for the PlayStation 2, the Xbox, and Windows PC in 2004, with its sequel coming out a year later for the same platforms. The entire premise of Battlefront is experiencing the most legendary battles within the Star Wars universe from the perspective of a trooper, not the heroes of the saga. What was it like during the Battle of Hoth, or the Battle of Endor through the eyes of a stormtrooper or a rebel soldier? It's the same concept you'd see for games like Call of Duty or the Battlefield franchise with their own real-life historical events. Both games were huge hits when they came out and are still considered by many to be some of the best Star Wars games ever released. But have they aged all that well since the early days, before the dark times, before the EA Star Wars Battlefront games? Do the original Battlefront games still hold up very well against what we have now? Now in this review, we're going to be looking at both games together as a pair, and the main reason being is because both of them are very similar in terms of premise and their gameplay. Both games allow you to take part in these grand epic battles that you saw in the movies from the perspective of a trooper, and there's a really cool appeal to that, again, especially if you have a lot of control over the outcome of what these battles were that you saw in the movies. The other thing of note is that both games allow you to play in both either first-person or third-person mode, which again gives you a different perspective of the battles and stuff. For me personally, I like playing in third-person because that's just something I've always done with the entire Battlefront series, and it just feels like something universal for me to do. Some people might feel a little bit different depending on which platform you're playing these games on, but for the majority of people out there, I'm pretty sure most of you played these games in third-person. And even if you're not a big Star Wars fan, there's still some stuff in these games that I feel like you could really enjoy, especially with the gameplay that's very reminiscent of what you got in the Battlefield series, maybe a little bit of Call of Duty here and there, and some other first-person and third-person shooter games that you would find on the market. But regardless though, let's look at the first Battlefront game and actually see where a lot of the cool aspects of this series really started, and why so many people still think that the Battlefront series are some of the best Star Wars games around. The first Star Wars Battlefront lays down the foundation of the series. It's funny going back to this years later and seeing how many things are still present in later games. Picking your side in the battles, different soldier classes, piloting vehicles, capturing command posts, and so much more. The best parts about Battlefront started here. The different classes give you access to various weapons and abilities that aid you in battle, with some classes being better suited for some situations over others. The only downside here is that you can't control any of the heroes like Luke Skywalker or Darth Vader, despite them showing up during matches. You have to understand, Battlefront was very rigid about keeping things focused on the troopers rather than the Jedi characters when it first started. There isn't a lot of game modes here in the first game, with the biggest omission being a true campaign mode. The historical campaign tries to fulfill this with classic battles, but it feels more like an afterthought with how basic it is. Instant action is the heart of the game, which lets you pick maps and drops you right into the battle. Once you pick your side, you can immediately do whatever you want on the battlefield. Certain maps like Hoth have objectives, like the Empire trying to target the shield generators and the Rebels trying to defend it. But not all maps have these circumstances, only maps based on important battles from the first 6 Star Wars movies. Speaking of maps, there's a total of 12 maps based on the planets from both the prequels and the original trilogy. You could fight on Tatooine, Hoth, Endor, Naboo, and many others. There are a few planets that are brand new and not canon to the overall franchise, however. To be totally honest, some parts of Battlefront have really aged poorly, specifically the walking speed and some of the bugs you could find here and there. But the game can still be fun to play either alone or with a friend via co-op. There's just a cool appeal of fighting legions of stormtroopers while defending any place within the Star Wars universe. People love that, and so do I. Now, for obvious reasons, I can't really test out the online functionality for multiplayer because I'm playing on the PlayStation 2 version. Granted, there's also an Xbox and a Windows PC version, but I didn't grow up playing those versions of the game. I grew up playing the PlayStation 2 version, so that's the one I'm really judging here. But it's also kind of funny looking at the game's box and seeing the GameSpy logo and the support for the online multiplayer. It's kind of surreal looking at that now, especially in the wake of both Xbox Live, PSN, as well as also Nintendo Switch Online. It's like a relic of the past. But either way, as far as as gameplay is concerned with the first Battlefront game, this game still holds up in my opinion. Granted, it's got a bunch of bugs and glitches that are, again, kind of archaic. It's like, of their time frame, but still, I still had a lot of fun going back and playing this game. There's just an appeal of just picking a certain type of like soldier class, whether you're for the Rebellion or for the Empire or for the droids or for the clones, and you're just like, again, just going into the battle and having control over these huge fights from the Star Wars universe and being able to influence the outcome. That's actually very freaking cool. And the main thing that a lot of people, myself included, really remember about Battlefront 1 is the classes of soldiers you could pick from. There's like about 4 or 5 different types of classes, each with their own abilities and weapons, and that really stands out to a lot of people. This is why when EA's game called Star Wars Battlefront got rid of all that stuff and gave you loadouts, people really had a big issue with that because there was just something cool about picking a specific class and having that role being able to contribute to your team in the big battle when you actually were doing specific things rather than just getting like all these different types of like perks and abilities and such and having your own customizable stuff. You didn't feel like you were really like taking on a role. Something else I should mention is that there is a lack of modes in the original Battlefront game. It is kind of a little bit annoying that we don't have like a variety of modes to kind of go through. We only really have historical battles, we have the Galactic Conquest, and instant action, which is really where you're going to spend the most amount of time. Galactic Conquest is kind of cool with the way that it's presented in like this game board type of fashion, but it gets very repetitive and doesn't really have a luster for too long. Same thing with historical battles, which isn't really a true campaign mode. But that was just the beginning for this series, and we ended up getting a really awesome sequel that people still play to this day and still swear by as being one of the best Star Wars games out there. But let's dive into exactly why Star Wars Battlefront 2 is so highly praised. Now, this is where many people feel like the series had reached its zenith. Star Wars Battlefront 2 came out a year later and significantly changed up a lot about the series. You still have the various trooper classes with abilities, but Pandemic decided to add even more that gave a lot more depth into the battles. Troopers gain access to rewards for doing well in matches, such as unlocking stronger weapons and bonus abilities like extra health and damage. However, now everybody could play as hero characters for the first time. Depending on which map and era you were on, you could play as characters like Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Princess Leia, and so on and so forth. This changed up the flow of battles in a big way, but were incredibly broken as well. Scoring enough points as a trooper gave the option to play as a hero immediately if you wanted to. Heroes are great by themselves, but the Jedi characters clearly had the biggest advantage. Their abilities are that overpowered and could decimate groups of troops while capturing command posts with ease. This often led to pretty one-sided victories on certain maps. This was rough in multiplayer for anybody on the receiving end of a hero's wrath. Troopers are just that flimsy compared to the Jedi. Alongside this, however, Battlefront 2 also introduced space battles to the series. This was amazing back then and is still fun to play now. You could pilot a starfighter on either side and take on legions of enemies in space, but you could also attack the enemy's capital ship directly by flying into a cruiser and sabotaging it from the inside out. There were definitely some issues with the balance in these battles, but it was still incredibly cool to be a part of. Unfortunately, both ground and space combat were separate and not connected, but they were still fun in their own respective ways. More maps were also added to the game, bringing the total to a whopping 24 maps to fight on, with more new planets from the Star Wars saga. Certain maps were restricted to certain eras, however, so you can't mix and match the different factions on certain planets. New maps such as the Death Star and the Tentative 4 Cruiser will appeal to the original trilogy fans, while Felucia and Mustafar will speak directly to those who love the prequels. Because of this, people still love Battlefront 2 more than most Star Wars games. It was a real step up over its predecessor and had a bit of everything for all types of fans, despite having a few flaws here and there that didn't get in the way of the fun experience. If I'm being honest with you guys out there, I gotta say it was a lot of fun going back and playing this game again for this review, and I totally understand why a lot of people were pretty upset when EA decided to take a few steps back with their take on Star Wars Battlefront. I mean, we get a lot of stuff in this game. We get a true campaign which is based on the 501st Legion of Stormtroopers, and we follow them throughout all the different eras and the big battles of the entire Star Wars saga. That's really freaking cool. That's an awesome setup for a cool campaign. And the other thing on top of that is that we get other game modes we get to explore, including 1 flag and 2 flag CTF, which is still fun to this day. We also get a new mode called Hunt, which puts you in the shoes of either the Empire or the Clone Troopers and allows you to hunt a specific race from the Star Wars universe. For example, if you're on Kashyyyk, you're hunting Wookiees. If you're on Tatooine, you're hunting Jawas. If you're on Endor, you're hunting the Ewoks. And something like that, as sick and as like crazy as that might be, it actually is pretty fun in video game form. The other thing too, like I mentioned, all the big changes to the core gameplay, including all the new abilities you could get, all the new types of like, extra classes, the heroes that you get to play as for the first time, including that big hero versus hero mode on Tatooine. That's a lot of fun. I know people that still love that to this day. And again, it really shows why this has such a long-lasting appeal. This game, this sequel, was really freaking dope. And again, really holds up as one of the best Star Wars games ever made. Now, if I'm being a little bit nitpicky and critical here, I do have to say that there is some issues that you have to deal with, especially if you're playing solo with a bunch of AI bots. There are some bugs and glitches that you might have to deal with depending on what maps that you're playing on. As well as also if you're playing with another person, either in co-op or versus against each other with split screen, that's still pretty fun, as weird as that might look. But even so, with all these little issues that I mentioned, this game is still fun and I still feel like it holds up. So after everything that I've said, can I recommend that you guys go back and play Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2? Are these games better than the EA Star Wars Battlefront games that we have now? While these games were developed in a different time frame, they were developed during a different console generation and have their little quirks here and there, they still offer a lot of fun times and a lot of great moments, especially for fans of the Star Wars franchise. Even if you're not a big Star Wars fan, I feel like the gameplay from both Battlefront 1 and 2 can offer a lot of great moments and fun times for people, either if you're playing solo or playing with a friend in either co-op or versus. There's a lot of great fan service for Star Wars faithful out there. There's also a lot of great gameplay elements for people that love third-person or first-person shooters. There's a lot of cool stuff going on with these games, and I can't recommend them enough if you haven't played them just yet. Anyway, guys, those are my thoughts about Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2. Again, some classic games from the PlayStation 2 era or Xbox or Windows PC, depending on what have you. Even if you're not a fan of new Star Wars that's being released now, there's still some plenty of old school Star Wars for you to enjoy right now. But those are just my thoughts about Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2. Let me know what you guys think about these games down below in the comment section. Tell me, did you grow up playing either Battlefront game? Did you play on a specific platform? What are some of your other favorite Star Wars games that are out there? Or let me know what you guys think about reviewing both of these games in this one review. Tell me about that stuff down below in the comment section. Thanks for watching this video, everyone. Go ahead and click the boxes on the side to see more videos and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Don't forget to go visit my Patreon page for exclusive gaming content that I know you'll really love. Hope you have a chill day. Peace out and stay epic, everybody.